Napa know-how.
This October, it's no trick. A 5-quart jug of Mobil 1 full synthetic motor oil is just $26.99. Plus, get a treat, a $10 Visa gift card. Because the only thing spookier than ghouls and ghosts is engine sludge. That's Mobil 1 5-quart jugs for $26.99 plus $10 back. Quality parts, helpful people. That's Napa know-how.
Napa know-how.
General states pricing. Sales prices do not include applicable state, local taxes, or recycling fees. Offer ends 10/31/19.
Welcome to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast, episode number 55. Some succeed because they are destined to, but most succeed because they are determined to. Henry Van Dyke.
Broadcasting from a dark, windowless room in Hollywood when we really should be working on that next draft.
It's the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast,
Showing you the craft and business of screenwriting while teaching you how to make your screenplay bulletproof. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome to another episode of the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Now, today's show is sponsored by Bulletproof Script Coverage. Now, unlike other script coverage services, Bulletproof Script Coverage actually focuses on the kind of project you are and the goals of the project you are. So we actually break it down by 3 categories: micro budget, indie film market, and studio film. There's no reason to get coverage from a reader that's used to reading tentpole movies when your movie is going to be done for $100,000. And we wanted to focus on that at Bulletproof Script Coverage. Our readers have worked with Marvel Studios, CAA, WME, NBC, HBO, Disney, Scott Free, Warner Brothers, The Blacklist, and many, many more. So if you need your screenplay or TV script covered by professional readers, head on over to covermyscreenplay.com. Today's show is also sponsored by the Make Your Movie Bootcamp. You want to make a feature film, but you have no idea where to get started. I feel you because that's exactly where I was years ago when I first got started. But I finally decided to stop talking about making a movie and go out and just do it. I want to help filmmakers break through their own fears and show them the secret sauce on how to make a profitable feature film. So I decided to put together the Make Your Movie Bootcamp and condense all 25 years of my experience into a 2-day intensive. And in the camp, I cover how to flesh out your idea, the screenwriting process, finding money, crowdfunding, directing your film, post-production workflows, marketing, submitting to film festivals, film deliverables, self-distribution secrets, and how not to get ripped off by predatory film distributors. And I'll also have 2 special guests from the film industry talking about how to find money and distribution. This bootcamp will be held in Burbank, California on October 26th and 27th at the Hilton Garden Inn in downtown Burbank. If you want to get 20% off the bootcamp, just head over to mymbootcamp.com. That's Make Your Movie, or mymbootcamp.com. Now, in the screenwriting world, guys, there's a lot of myths of BS rules or brules that are taught to screenwriters, especially young and up-and-coming screenwriters, that you need to have an agent and you really need to live in Hollywood and you can't do it without being union, and all of these things that you have to have and have to do in order to be able to make a living as a screenwriter. Well, today's guest is Alan Johnson. He is a screenwriter who has not followed any of these rules and has sold 10 screenplays outside of the Hollywood system. He lives in North Carolina. He does not have an agent, and he actually makes a living doing what he loves to do as a screenwriter. Now, I wanted to bring Alan on the show so he could teach us his tips and tricks on how to get screenwriting gigs outside the Hollywood system, what he's done and how he does it, and also tell us what his daily writing routine is, and just little tips and tricks on how he does what he does. So without any further ado, please enjoy this inspirational conversation with Alan Johnson. I'd like to welcome to the show Alan Johnson, brother. Thank you so much for being on the show, bro.
Hey, I'm honored to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, absolutely. So you are a longtime tribe member. Without question. You've been. I talked to you on the Ask Alex show when I was doing that for a while. Like, this is like 2 years ago now.
At least 2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 to 3 years ago we did that, and we were talking. And you reached out to me the other day, and you were just as a casual statement, you just said, "Oh, by the way, yeah, you know, I've sold 10 scripts, and 3 of them got produced, and I also sold some plays, and they're being produced as well." And and I'm like, wait a minute, you don't live in LA. and like, how does this work? So I was like, I need to get you on the show. I invited you on the show because I want to give everybody out there who's listening to this podcast some hope that you don't have to live in LA to make this happen. Look, we all love to get the big giant projects, but there's ways of making a living with your art and with your writing outside of the Hollywood system. So before we jump into all of that, sir, how did you get started in the business?
Well, it's been a really long, slow journey. Like most kids of our vintage, we're of similar vintages, as you like to say.
Yeah.
I grew up obsessing over our film heroes. I wanted to be Obi-Wan. I wanted to be Indiana Jones. I wanted to be James Bond. All these exciting action heroes, that we grew up with. And I grew up mainly in South Carolina. And as we all know, it is another mecca of Hollywood.
Obviously.
Yeah. I mean, there was nothing. There was no realization that, people actually did this for a living. It was just a magic thing that happened in a dark theater, So I never really had any education. The only time I ever got close to anything was like my senior year in high school. My friends and I got together and made a ridiculous spoof film. It was awful. We had to borrow a VHS camcorder from the athletic department in order to shoot this thing over a single weekend. It was awful, but that was my first taste. And I was never a great student. I was the one always daydreaming. That was the note always going home to my mom, constantly daydreaming. Well, look at me now. Daydreaming for a living, right?
Yeah.
But I couldn't get into a really good university. I went to a junior college for a while, and they actually had a decent little theater program, and so I started getting into acting. A few classes, of touching on to script analysis, stuff like that. And I enjoyed that. And then I finally was able to transfer to a 4-year university. I transferred to the University of Utah, which is great because we had Sundance right there in our backyard. So I had an opportunity to see that. And again, though, this was in the early 2000s. This is like 2000, 2001, 2002. So it's a very different world than it is now. We were just starting to see the celebrity invasion of Sundance and how that thing changed over time. But I continued to make a few little short films here and there. It wasn't really great. I was not a talented filmmaker. The education that I got there was mainly theoretical. A lot of film theory. I read a ton and watched a ton of movies, which are great. It's a great education. I think that's something that's missing from a lot of young filmmakers today. They don't study the classics. Mm-hmm. And so I had a great background in that, great study. But all the upper level classes were all they were geared for people who were voted in essentially by the administration, and they only had a very few amount of cameras and equipment. And back then, everything was taught on 16 millimeter because that's how real artists did it.
Obviously.
And of course, back then, they taught editing as actual splicing
flatbed
of the film. I remember walking by these guys with these glazed look in their eyes, staring at this fop thing in this box, as they're taping. They're, pulling the tape across their thing, learning how to edit. And of course, we had to fight over the few high 8 camcorders. And we were editing on like a 1999 version of Final Cut. The one that if you had a 5-minute video, it took about 5 hours to render. Mm-hmm. And inevitably it would crash halfway through and then you'd have to start all over. People sleeping underneath the desks in the editing room and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so that was, my film education. And during this time, I was never aware of any kind of, here's a way to get out to LA and here's a sponsorship or any kind of internship or anything like that. Nothing like that was available, or, they just didn't offer it to me right. One way or the other, that was it. But at the same time, I was continuing to try and do acting. I found a little agent there in town and I started doing commercials and things like that. At the same time, kind of my other passion along with this, I do historical European martial arts. I specialize in historical European sword fighting. So I started sport fencing in college, and then I got into the more historical aspect. I started finding ways to get into films that way, doing some stunt fighting, doing some choreography. But after a while, I started really focusing in on my screenwriting classes. I had a really great professor, and that's where I really found my love. I really found being able to sit there and create and to delve deep into these characters and come up with whatever I wanted. I didn't have a budget. So that really became a passion for me, and that's really where I kept honing my craft. In fact, I took the class a couple of times without getting credit for it. I had expired my allotment for getting collegiate credit for this class, but I kept wanting to take it because I loved the atmosphere so much. So that went on for a while, and then everything started to stagnate. Life wasn't going well. Had some relationship changes that didn't go well. I was getting down. I was getting depressed. I was working at a movie theater as a manager. That glorious gig. Do whatever you can to even touch the shoe.
The celluloid. The celluloid. Yes. And we actually had to back then. We actually had flatbed reels with the film on it. We had to do it upright, stuff like that. So I'm sitting there, and I one day I'm sitting there opening up the theater, and it wasn't in a great area of town. I've got a gun pressed up to my face because a guy's jacking the till for literally $65. I'm like, dude, this is gonna buy you a shoe, not even a pair. And so I think I need a life reboot. I just need to kind of hit reset. And it was your Fight Club moment. It was when Tyler Durden put the gun to the head at the in the back alley. Is like, what do you really want to do?
Yeah. So, but at this point, I didn't have any options. So I went back home to South Carolina. I went back to my roots, and again, I was hoping that I'd be able to kind of get back into things and find a new way to get back in. But it was even worse. It was just dry. There was no market. There was no opportunity. I did find a little agent, got a little extra work here and there. But
you got an agent in South Carolina.
Yeah.
So they had screenwriting agents, writing agents in South Carolina?
Well, it was more talent agent, just because I was trying to grasp for anything. So it was not a literary agent, wasn't anything like that.
Got it.
So I got in a Kevin Bacon movie as an extra sitting in an office, and
which was, I'm assuming, awesome.
Well, now I'm great at the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. I score at that game now, right? So, right. But at that point, there was nothing. So I submit one of my favorite scripts of all time to a screenwriting contest. This is the script that I just absolutely loved. This is the best work I'd ever done. And the thing with this contest is that if you submitted to this contest, you get free coverage. And I was really excited about that. And the coverage I got back just absolutely eviscerated me.
Ooh.
It destroyed my story. I mean, I keep it with me everywhere I go to keep me humble and to remind me. I've got the thing right here, and the comments were, this is a premise without any commercial spin. Why would a producer spend money on this? This has been done many times. This script is dull from page one. There isn't a shred of originality to it.
Ooh.
There's like four pages of that.
Oh.
I quit that day.
Uh-huh.
I quit that day. I was done. That's it. That was the best thing I could have ever written.
You took your shot. You went up to the plate, and that was it.
That's it. That was it. There was nothing. So I started getting into jobs. I was doing designing brochures for a restroom partition company. I was one of those horrible people that called you in the middle of the dinner asking if you wanted to refinance on your home. I mean, that's how bad it had sunk,
Yeah.
So about a year after that contest, I get a call out of the blue from a friend of mine from out west who still lived in Utah. He was a DP, really good DP. He had been working on an independent film for a producer, and he says, "Are you still writing?" And kind of, what are you looking at? He says, "Well, this guy, I just finished shooting a film for him. He wants to jump right into another one, but he needs a writer. Can I send him something for you?"
Wow. If that's not the universe knocking on your door, I don't know what is,
right.
man.
But it's one of those things where, like, do I even dare to get my hopes up even a little? So, of course, I sent it off. And in less than a week, called me up, said, "I loved what you wrote here. I want you to write this story for me. Here's the concept. we're shooting in a month. Let's go. That was my first professional sale. That's my first professional assignment. Since then, I've had 10 professional sales. They've all been assignments, and 3 of them had been produced. I've been able to produce or sell 4 stage plays. 3 of those have been produced. I've been able to write magazine articles. I've spoken on panels and workshops and conventions and to different kinds of writing groups. And my best accomplishment, 10 years ago, I got married and my wife is still with me. You know? They haven't disowned me yet, you know? So from, literally from going to the point where I thought there was no hope whatsoever, I thought that I didn't have anything to offer.
Right.
And all this takes place in sunny South Carolina,
Right.
Not LA.
That's fascinating, man. That's fascinating. So did you ever consider moving to LA?
I did a little bit. I had seen a number of people who had made that jump. Especially when I was living in Salt Lake, they're excited. They had both as actors and producers and directors and writers. They made that jump, and just about without fail, within 6 months to a year, they all came back. They got chewed up and spit out, and they were angry and bitter and broke. And to me, that's all I knew. I said, well, if you make that jump, unless you've got an in already, there's no hope. So I was too scared to make that jump. I never, thought, I could do that. It takes a lot of money to make that jump, and it just wasn't there.
I mean, being an East Coast boy myself, it took me years before I jumped out here. I got out here 11 years ago, and it took me. I went out once. I think right after that whole shooting for the mob thing. Came out to LA and I got my ass handed to me, like like so handed to me, wasn't even funny. And I went back to Florida with my tail between my legs. It took me another 4 years before I attempted it. Not 4 years, like 7 years before I attempted it again. But at that point, it was a little bit different. I was on my feet. I was coming from a place of strength. But I came out here with nothing. Like I knew 2 people. No job prospects. My whole plan was have a Final Cut system. I'm just going to set it up in my extra bedroom that we're going to get a 2-bedroom place in North Hollywood, and we'll see what happens. And it just so happened that everything kind of worked out. But I get you. You. It's not an easy jump. But also, if you only know one way, if you move to LA, if you don't have a job waiting for you, you're going to get destroyed. Yes and no. It all depends on how you lay it out. What I find interesting about your story, and I think it's something we could dive into a little bit, is that first right hook that you got with that coverage.
Yeah.
That decimated you.
Absolutely.
That completely knocked you out. And it's so many of us on our journey. I always refer to that quote by Rocky Balboa as like, it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. Right. And it's so true. And you're going to get those punches, and you're going to get that shrapnel. You're going to get the scarring. You're going to get all of that stuff. You're going to get weathered. I think you're going to get weathered during this process. And I find it fascinating that, how old were you when you got that smack?
Let's see. That was, I think I was probably in my early to mid 30s.
Yeah. So you weren't a kid anymore. You weren't a kid, but at that point, and I feel you because I was there, because I lived outside of the Hollywood for so long, that one punch, knocks you out. And, it's interesting. If you wouldn't have gotten that phone call from that DP, what do you think would have happened? Because that phone call changed your life.
It absolutely did. I like to think that I didn't have that perspective then, but I kind of have a little bit of this perspective now. If you keep on doing what you do and you do it in the right way, I think that you are going to be given opportunities to succeed. You just have to be sure that you're in a place to accept them and have the, ammo, for lack of a better term, to take advantage of the situation. If I wouldn't have had a script ready to go when he made that call, that opportunity would have passed me by. You know, I like to think if I was still trying to do the right thing and be a better person and stuff like that, somehow I would have been rewarded with another opportunity. But you can't bank on that. You have no idea. And my spirit still would have been crushed. I would still have been in a soul crushing job that I hated, waiting for what I don't know. You know, it's scary to think.
I mean, I'm still waiting for that studio to call me. You know, I've taken meetings and I've done a lot of things outside of that, but I'm still waiting for Marvel to call me and see, you know, to get that, you know, like I always put out there, like Marvel, I'll take the meeting. We'll see what happens. But
I put out there that, you know, my favorite character in all of fiction is Obi-Wan. Yes. And so apparently the universe has passed me by with the opportunity to write the Kenobi series, but that's okay. I'm happy that it's happening. But maybe
I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you.
Right.
I was going to ask you that. I was like, so what do you think of that whole Obi-Wan Kenobi series coming out? Because I know you're such a huge fan of Obi-Wan.
Yeah. I know. I'm excited for it. I'm glad that it's happening, and absolutely tickled that Ewan's going to be a part of that. And you know, I couldn't think of anybody better to do that. And I'm just, the only negative is that I'm not involved. But I'm sure
obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, I said the same thing. I said the same thing about every single Marvel movie ever made. And for that matter, every Star Wars movie ever made. So, all right. So you got the one opportunity to write a screenplay. And do you mind talking about money, or is that something you want to kind of keep quiet, even on the early stuff?
I can tell you what I was told. I have no idea if what I was told about the budget at the beginning was the same at the end. Mm-hmm. So at the beginning, they were talking about a $300,000 budget. And I think it ballooned up from there. I'm pretty sure. I have no idea what it ended up being at the end. Of course, you know, as a writer, you know, you work with them early on in the process. You complete your draft, you turn it in, and then you sit around and the film comes out and you're like, oh, that's what you did with it. You know? Mm-hmm. So that's, you know, you're usually out. You know, once you turn in that final draft, you're usually out of the process. So
by doing that one project, that kind of you just kept getting work from that producer, or how did you get the next handful?
It was all kind of linked together. There were a couple other projects that came from that producer. Mm-hmm. There were other people that worked on that production in other capacities that went on to do other jobs that ended up reaching out to me and said, hey, I really like what you did here. You're easy to work with. I like how you collaborate. I have this idea, you know, or I'm working with this, or I've got this business partner. He wants to do this thing. Let's explore this idea. And it kind of ballooned out from there. So it was these links and chains. And then a couple of times there were instances where I saw somebody that was working on a project that I liked, and I just contacted them, you know, online, and just said, hey, I really like what you're doing. This is a lot like the type of stuff that I enjoy doing. Here's my IMDb. If you're ever looking for another writer in the future, you know, I'd love to work with you. And once or twice, then, you know, they've come back. They haven't all worked out as far as getting all the way through production. But, you know, just keeping an eye out, just being a fan, you know, just saying, I like what you're doing. I want to be a part of it. Here's what I've done so far. You know, if you'd love to want to collaborate, I'm here, you know?
So you're basically, you're hustling, sir.
Yes. At times, you know, and again, it's kind of funny because one thing that I've had to accept is I'm getting on in my years. I'm not as young as I used to be. I'm now doing the daddy thing and the husband thing. Yes, seasoned like a great chicken or something like that. Yes. I don't know, but I've had to manage my expectations a little bit more. What I think it's really important, at least for me in my career, to identify what am I willing to sacrifice to get my goals. What am I not willing to sacrifice?
As you get older, that does become very important.
It changes. I'm willing to sacrifice a lot to achieve my screenwriting dreams. I'm not willing to sacrifice my relationship with my wife. I'm not willing to sacrifice my relationship with my kids. That means that sometimes my indie film hustle turns into a little bit more of an indie film shuffle. Mm-hmm. You know, it's filmmaking over 40, indie film shuffle. You know, mm-hmm. But it changes. You know, you have to be at peace with that too. So as long as you're willing to establish, you know, what you're willing to sacrifice, what you're not willing to sacrifice, and then work towards that and be at peace with the rest, you can manage your expectations a little bit better from there.
I think as you get older, you start to realize, at least I have, that you start defining what happiness is for you, and you start defining what not only what you're willing to do, what kind of BS you're willing to put up with, if any, as you get older. But that tolerance level goes way down than it used to. Like things I did in my 20s, I would shoot somebody now if I had to do, because I just don't have the patience for that anymore.
Yeah, I don't got time for foolishness anymore.
Yeah, I just don't. And just being just understanding the definition of what makes you happy is so powerful, man. Because I really hope, I really hope that people out there can just dive into that one question, like, what makes me happy? Like, what do I really need to be happy? And do I have to live in the Hollywood Hills and make $1 billion? Sure, that's a dream. If you want it to be a dream, great. Is it going to really make you happy? What are the chances of you getting to that point in this lifetime? You have to be honest with yourself. I'm all about chasing that dream. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
That's what my whole thing is about. But like I always say, like, follow your dream, but don't be an idiot. So you like.
No, and I think that also translates well to how we spend our time. Mm-hmm. I'm really disturbed by this growing trend of how much time people spend, especially online, discussing how much they hate something.
So much wasted energy.
Like, if you were to take half of that time and dedicated it to something constructive, or at least building up something that you like, how much better, would it be? You could actually be generating something positive. And I've noticed that, with people that you work with professionally, if somebody's constantly talking about how much they hate something and how much, this is horrible and that's horrible, you don't want to work with that person. You want to be with the person who's upbeat, who's positive, who builds up, and that took me a while to realize. One of my in my past, I was also a film critic for about a year for a small little newspaper. Like,
you did anything to be around the business. Like, you literally anything.
And I enjoyed being a film critic in the sense that, I got to go to all these screenings and stuff like that. And that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. Watched about 4 to 5 movies a week, in the theater. But I was a terrible critic. I was bitter because I thought that's what I had to be. That's that film school mentality. If it's not black and white and subtitled, then it's just drivel for the masses. Anything that could remotely be, commercially relevant, that's for the groundlings down there, and you're to be above such thing. And you start to buy into that stuff, and it's ridiculous. But then one day you wake up and the sun is shining and the birds are singing, and you think to yourself, man, I just want to watch Indy punch some Nazis, man. And you're like,
and there's nothing wrong with that. And
that's what I want to do, And so that's kind of been my thing,
I've been pumping this theory out lately, and it's going to be in a bunch of episodes coming up. And I've said it a couple times, but I think it's a really great analogy about the disease that both you and I have. And it is a disease. I mean, once you get bitten by this virus, which is called being a filmmaker, being in the film industry, it is there is no vaccination for it. There's no immunization for it. And I mean, it's kind of like herpes. It's kind of like once you get it, you got it for life. Yep. It sometimes it's dormant, but sometimes it flares up. And but no matter what you do, there's a little itch. There's something like, it's always there. It's a horrible analogy, but it's so true.
It is absolutely true. And it's one of those things where, it's when people ask you, about writing, why would you do something like that? And you have other talents, don't you? And you respond with something ridiculous like, it's not that I can't do anything but write, but I just can't do anything but write, Yeah. And they just sit there and blink at you, and you're like, well, they don't get it. You either get it or you don't. And I am so incredibly blessed. I'm so fortunate that I have an incredible wife who supports me in that.
Oh, amen.
And I mean, if everybody has got to have that person in their camp, whether it's a spouse or a partner or a friend or whatever, that just supports you 100%. you also need the people that can call you out on stuff, and sometimes that could be the same person. Sometimes you can get somebody that gives you honest feedback that can really be critical but loving. But you always need that person there to say, no matter what, I'm gonna believe in you, because you have to have that life raft. It's way too hard without it.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I couldn't have. Well, there would be no Indie Film Hustle without my wife. So I'll be straight up. I mean, if it wasn't for her telling me, Alex, do what you got to do. You're gonna, and I still worked, and I still was doing post, and I was still directing every once in a while. But she was the one that just kept supporting me. She's like, I know this is going to turn into something. It's just going to take time. I believe in you, and that belief is what got me through. All this time that I've been doing this. It's been a little over 4 years now that I've been with Indie Film Hustle. And all the stuff I've done. But if it wasn't for her, it really wouldn't have happened. If I would have had someone nagging or jumping on top of me, like, what do you do? Go get a staff job somewhere. Or, she gave me the freedom to do what I need to do. And there's never underestimate the power of a good partner, whether male or female, whatever whatever.
Absolutely.
Whatever support you can get, man, that is so invaluable. And the thing, again, I wanted to have you on the show, man, because you represent something that I haven't had on the show before, which is somebody who's making a living outside of the Hollywood system, and to give people who are listening hope that can be done, because that is not an image that is projected anywhere. I don't see that anywhere. I don't see anyone talking about it. I don't see anyone saying, hey, I live in South Carolina and I'm a working screenwriter. Like, that is not something I see. I just don't see it. And I'm in this every day.
Right.
I read everything. I'm in this all the time. I talk to a lot of people. I've never seen this. So that's why I wanted to kind of put this image out into the world, and having you come on is so important, because I really do hope it gives people out there, not only in the U.S., but in the world, and that they don't live in near a major city, or they're, in Calcutta somewhere, or, they're in South Africa or something like that. There's always a way to do it. It's just about being prepared when that opportunity knocks, but you've got to show up every day with no expectations. You got to show up every day with no expectations of what's going to happen. And if you just keep showing up every day, and I use Indie Film Hustle as such a good analogy for that, because every day I would show up, I would put out 2 podcasts every day. I would put blog posts out every day. And at the beginning, crickets. Yeah. I mean, I did jump, I did move fairly quickly, but it's still every day. Just show up, grind. Grind, and you got to love that.
That's kind of one of the things that I talk about when I do my little classes and workshops. A lot of people, especially the more auteur variety, like to talk about the muse and being inspired and stuff like that. Well, sometimes you just got to tell that lazy old muse, I'm going to be here tomorrow from 3 o'clock to 8 o'clock. If you want to show up, that's
I'll
great.
Be here. I'll be here.
I'm going to be here working. And sometimes she shows up, and sometimes she doesn't. That's fine. I still have a plan.
Regardless. Now, do you have an agent?
I don't. Nope.
It's, again, another beautiful example of you need an agent to get anything done. No, you don't.
Well, writers and agents ain't really talking these days anyway, so.
That's true that, sir. True that.
The ATA and the WJ aren't exactly on speaking terms at the moment, but.
Are you union, by the way? Are you union?
I'm not.
So do you have an agent at all?
No, I don't.
And that's another wonderful thing about your story is that so many people tell you in film school and everything, you need an agent to get anything sold, or you need an agent to have a career. You don't.
Right. No, you don't. Now, I would, it's something I would like to get. I would like to get to the point where I'm getting those WGA wages, and things like that. But the WGA and the ATA aren't talking these days anyway. So I'm just, doing the thing that I've always done for the last 10 years.
You're hustling outside the
business as usual.
You're hustling outside the system because you're not WGA either. You're non-union.
No.
So, and again, your rate for screenplays varies, because what is the what is the WGA minimum? I think, isn't it like 30,000, 40,000?
I think it's like 36 for a feature or something like that. It's been a while since I've looked at the schedule of minimums, but and again with so much new media stuff, there's a lot of variety, and they've done a lot of work to try and make it affordable for different levels. So they got the ultra low budget, and there's different ways that you can kind of use union writers and defer payments or break it up a little bit. And I'm not an expert in that stuff. Sure. But yeah, I try to work with people's budgets. I try to make sure that it's something that works for me. And this is something, again, my great wife has to keep reminding me of, and I have a tendency to undersell myself. She keeps on reminding me, you're worth more than this, and so I need that voice in my head as well to help out with that. But changes.
I'll tell you what. This is another affliction that we have, is that when you hustle so hard, because for me, when I was coming out in post, literally anything that knocked on the door, I took.
Right.
I just took it because I was outside the system. So like, oh my God, it's a job. I got to take it. I was an editor in Florida, with the occasional directing job, which was rare. So I took anything and I worked with any budget. That's why my IMDb is sick. It's stupid.
Right.
Like, it's so long because I took every single project that showed up.
Right.
And at a certain point, you just have to like, hey, I'm worth more than this. And it took my wife to tell me, like, babe, you can't keep doing this. You're killing yourself for a few grand. Like, that might have worked when you were 25, but you can't keep doing that. So it's a mind shift. It's a mindset change that you have to kind of do in your head, because you're just like, it's that kind of like, oh, I if I don't take this, when's the next one showing up? So I got to take it, and I'll underbid anybody else to get it. So make sure I get it. It's that kind of desperate mentality that we outside the system sometimes have,
and that nasty imposter syndrome sneaking in there. It's like, if I overbid myself, they'll say no. They'll realize that I don't really know what I'm doing, and that type of stuff. And then you read other people's screenplays, and you're like, okay. I'm at least better than that, and that got made. So let me keep going.
Exactly. Now I want to ask you, what is your writing process like? Do you have a daily writing process? How do you work?
I used to have a daily writing process, but with my kids, that kind of changes a little bit. So I kind of have to be flexible and adjust. And a lot of it depends on, if I have an assignment or not. Mm-hmm. If it's something that I'm just writing spec, then I can kind of just go with the flow and write when I have time to do something like that. If I have a writing assignment, of course, my family's understanding. We kind of create blocks of time for me to work, things like that. But what I like to do, especially with assignments, is I spend a lot of time in outlining and developing before I even type fade in. I would say that out of the entire time that I spend writing, it's probably at least 65 to 70% of that is before I actually write the script. So I really like to take a lot of meetings with the producer or the studio or the director, whoever's involved, and really make sure we get on the same page about what's going on. And I really try to, especially with all these things being, low budget, ultra low budget things, I write to their assets. So we'll have meetings about, where are you planning to shoot this? What type of things you already have that you want to use that I can use in developing the story. Do you have performers that you're going to cast in your movie? Can I see their reel? Can I see some of their previous work so I know how they deliver their lines? What kind of cadence do they have? Let me get inside their head so I can deliver something that fits with the kind of characters that they do. Those type of things that I'll sit down and talk with them. If they've had department heads set up like wardrobe or, locations or, stunts and special effects, what can I do to make your job easier? What can you do? What can you not do? How long are you going to be shooting? Do you want to avoid nights? Do you want to avoid, dealing with rain? So I get all those questions answered beforehand so that when I start writing my outline, everybody's already on that same page with, okay, here's the things we're going to do. It's so much easier to change 10 pages of an outline than realize you're on page 70 of a screenplay and you got to go back and start over because something doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're able to hand those producers or that director that outline, and they can see what every single scene is, where it's going, the things that they'll need, it's so much easier to change stuff in that moment rather than pumping out draft after draft after draft, and then, you know, having people kick around this 90-page document as opposed to something that's 10 pages. So that's something that I usually try and do with a lot of these projects.
You know, what's great about that is you are really coming at it as being of service to your client, basically,
Yes.
where a lot of screenwriters have this ego that it's like, it's my work, it's my story, it's my screenplay. I'm like, no, dude, you were hired for a job and you being paid for that job, and you need to be of service to the client. You know, when you get to the point where you're Aaron Sorkin or Charlie Kaufman or Shane Black, then or Tarantino, then you do whatever the hell you want, and it's a different conversation at that point. But you're still being of service, and even these screenwriters who are working on, you know, Avengers, I promise you that they were being of service to the Russo brothers.
Absolutely. They have a very specific sandbox that we're working in, you know, and going back to, you know, talking about Star Wars, you know, we've seen a lot of writers come and go. And I really think a lot of that is probably because, you know, I'm not in the room. I don't really know. But I imagine a lot of that is, you know, the producers say, here's our overall vision. You can work with this or not. And if, you know, things get outside of that and they decide, you know, I can't stay in this box that you've given me, then you move on to somebody who can.
Right.
And, you know, it's the thing with independent stuff. It doesn't matter how artistic or eloquent you think your script is. If it's unshootable, it's unproducible, then they'll find somebody else to replace you with. So it's not so much selling out as it is buying in.
Right. You know? Exactly. Now, I want to ask you, Ben, how do you stay motivated when you're not surrounded by the business? You know, because like for me, I mean, I live in Hollywood. I live in the Mecca. When I walk out my door, there's everywhere there's something about the business. And I know a lot of people outside Hollywood. That's like when you come to Hollywood, I'm sure you've been here, right? You've been to LA?
No, I haven't.
So if you get to LA one day, you'll walk around, your mouth will be on the floor, and you'll be like, oh my God, the streets are paved with gold. I was like that for about 2 years until I became cynical. You know, because when I first got here, it was just like, oh my God, is that a post house? Is that Warner Brothers? Is that Disney? Is that Sony? Yeah. Like you just, everywhere you go, it's all about the business. You know, any coffee shop, that's the big joke. Any coffee shop you walk into, all you see is Final Draft everywhere, you know, and all these laptops. But you don't have that in South Carolina. I didn't have that in Miami.
No.
So how did you stay, or how do you stay motivated to just kind of keep after this dragon, if you will?
Well, I think that, you know, writing is one of those things where you have to be in love with the process of writing. That's the thing that has to be pleasurable for you and rewarding, because if you're chasing accolades or you're chasing the end result, you're going to be disappointed, because production is an absolute meat grinder on scripts. You know, you don't realize it at first, but the script that you write will not be the film that's seen.
Oh, no.
And if I'm looking to see every single word that I put on this page beautifully, you know, blown up into a big screen or on the TV exactly the way I wrote it, I can't use that as my motivation, because it'll never happen. You know, right. If I'm chasing, you know, that name on the screen, yeah, it's nice to see your name on the screen, but you know what? Everybody gets rewritten.
Everybody, Oscar winners.
Everybody,
Oscar winners.
I mean,
everybody.
Yeah, you had that great interview with John August a couple you know episodes back, and he's one of the best writers in the entire business, and he gets rewritten. You know, and kind of coming back to my story, you know, I've made 10 sales and 3 have made it through production. You know, John August has like 8 or 9 films on his IMDb, but what do you say? It sold like 30 or something like that.
He's worked on 30 or 40 projects. Same thing with Jim Wools, you know, the writer of Fight Club. When you look at his IMDb, he's got like a handful of credits, but Jim doesn't stop working. He is constantly working on projects, but they just, for whatever reason, they don't go over the finish line. And a lot of these
single writer,
a lot of these guys
never see the light of day.
Yeah, and it's sad, and I love what John said. I love what John said. He's like, you've got to become kind of like a stock picker. Like, is this project have the legs to get to the finish line? Like, what are the if I'm going to take on this gig, it's not about the money anymore. It's about like, I want to see something produced. So like when Tim Burton calls, generally speaking, those projects get done.
Yeah, that's true. So to kind of come back, full circle to your original question, and I have to be in love with that story. Is this a place that I want to live for a few months? Is this exciting to me? So that's what keeps me motivated. Is the joy of writing. I enjoy that creative process. I enjoy collaborating. It took me a while to realize, but I am one cog in the machine. Mm-hmm. But if I do my job really well, everyone else will be excited by that too, and things will run more smooth. So I have to be in love with what I do and the way I do it. And to me, that's self-motivating. If you have to look to other sources to be able to do something that you claim you love, it's not going to work out. It's going to end. If you got to be able to self-motivate.
Yeah.
You got to be in love with the process and committed to that. And that doesn't mean you don't have bad days or bad weeks or even bad months.
Or
That's
years.
Okay.
Or bad years, man.
I don't know anybody who has any job on the planet that hasn't at some point said, man, this is a drag. And that's okay. You do that. And then you find other things to get your mojo back and you keep going.
Right. It's about being in love with the grind. You've got to love the daily grind. You can't do this for the red carpet. You can't. No. You can't do it for the red carpet. And there's so many filmmakers who do it literally for the red carpet. And I'm like, dude, because when the red carpet's over, which is so quick, it's done. And now what? Now you're depressed for like months because it takes forever to get another project off the ground.
And it's especially true for writers, because honestly, nobody cares about writers. It really don't. I was at a workshop once, and a girl asked me if I was famous, and I'm like, no, of course not. I'm not famous. She's like, "What, you write movies?" So I said, "What's your favorite movie at all time?" And she said like Clueless or something like that. Who wrote that? She had no clue. Her most favorite movie at all time. She had no clue who the author. She knew the author of her favorite book. She knew the stars of her favorite show. Writers don't get famous, and that's okay.
There's only a handful that do, and I mentioned a few of them: Sorkin, Tarantino, Shane Black, Kaufman.
Well, and most of those are filmmakers as well. But
like Goldman,
exclusive writers,
Goldman.
Goldman,
there's a handful of them. There's not a whole lot of them that people really know who they are, because it's a thankless job. Unfortunately, it is a thankless job.
And it's one of those things that, unfortunately, and this might sound a little self-righteous, but that's okay because we're having fun here. Mm-hmm. But it's one of those. It's like driving. Everybody understands because they know how it works. They think they know how to do it well.
Yeah, I watched a movie, so I obviously can make one. It's the only industry.
It's with the film stuff. If you sit somebody in front of a camera, there's a lot of buttons there. There's a lot of numbers on that thing. That's kind of scary. You sit somebody down in front of an Av, and they're like, "Why are there colors on the keyboard? This is ridiculous. This is scary." But you sit somebody down to write a story, they're like, "Oh, I can make words. I can write top to bottom, left to right. I can do this. This is easy, right?" So it's one of those things that, unfortunately, especially with the independent productions, it's a little bit difficult to convince people this is something worth investing in. I'm worth investing in to get you a good script. And they're like, well, I can write a script. Anybody can write a script. That's easy. Mm-hmm. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions. I ask all of my guests, sir. What advice would you give a screenwriter wanting to break into the business today?
Study the craft. There's a lot of, especially young writers, get so caught up and so excited about the idea of breaking the rules, being the rebel. And when you're starting out, it just looks like sloppy writing. There's a reason why this format is specific to the industry, is because it tells other people how to do their jobs. If you don't know how to properly format a slug line, when they go to drop that script into Movie Magic, it's going to get all screwed up, and they're going to have to spend extra time to fix the problems that you created because you couldn't format a slug line properly.
And you're not going to get called again.
No, probably not. But if you can do that easy. And if you can say, hey, you know what, I can help you with tagging the props and the vehicles and stuff like that on my end, so it can populate it, when you drop it in, you might earn yourself some extra points there. So that's certainly something that I would suggest, for young writers to do. Study the classics, read as much as you can, read screenplays, see how they work, see how they look on the page. Study your genres, whatever you're writing and whatever your wheelhouse is. Make sure that you understand subtext. For the love of God, please understand on-the-nose dialogue and how to avoid it. And don't get so obsessed, especially when you're first starting out, with trying to blow people's minds. You're not going to out Inception. I mean, honestly, it's just an action movie that the characters themselves slept through, Right. So it's you're not, just learn how to be entertaining, learn how to tell a story, and then you can go and write your existential crisis piece that's in slow motion and black and white and all that stuff.
Why don't you try to build 3 or 4 houses the proper way, and then if you want to create your masterpiece and have windows on the floors and doors in the ceiling, then do that. But
I believe it was David Mamet in his book on directing. He had a story in there about, I think it was in the 60s or 70s, there was a trend called counterculture architecture, where basically it was all these hippie architects were fed up with the fuddy-duddy way that they used to do things back in the day. And we're going to build buildings based on how we feel, not upon these formulas, these gross things that you old guys use. And of course, it was a colossal failure. There's a reason why these blueprints exist, and you need to figure that out. So then, when you go to bend a few of the rules, you know exactly what you're doing, how far to take it, and you're doing it so it serves a purpose in the story, as opposed to I'm just being a rebel because that's cool.
Yeah, because it's not your ego you're feeding; it's the story you're feeding.
Exactly.
Now, can you tell me what book had the biggest impact in your life or career?
So when with most writers, when they start out, usually the first thing that they come in contact with is Sid Field's screenplay. And of course, that was one of the early ones, and that was influential. But the one that really struck a chord with me was one called Lou Hunter's Screenwriting 434. The most obnoxious title ever. He was a screenwriting professor at UCLA, and it's essentially his class. And this is the first book that I had ever read where he actually takes you through the entire process of writing the script. Here's how I gather ideas. Here's some things that you can do to formulate ideas about stories. Here's how I can develop characters. Here's how I give them personality and voice. And he actually goes through and writes an entire screenplay inside the book, showing you the process that he goes through. So he essentially, broke down this mystification of how you somehow put all these words on a page and it makes sense, into I'm doing these specific things to achieve this creative result. And so that was really, really influential to me. So Lou Hunter's Screenwriting 434, I have no idea if it's even still available. Of course, this was back in 2000, 2001. So we're going back a little way.
Amazon will have it. I'm sure
someone will have it. It was a great one.
Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
Knowing my worth is a big one. Knowing whose opinions really matter. I made the mistake with my first film. I read the comments.
Oh, yeah. Don't do that. Don't
now
do
I
that.
Laugh,
Yeah.
But especially as a writer, you have so little control over the end result of that picture.
Of course.
It's never going to be exactly the way you wrote it. The lines are never going to be delivered exactly the way you thought. People are going to make stuff up. The actors want to put their stuff in. Anybody who has a voice on that set is going to want to change it in some way. And it happens, and that's the process, and you kind of have to be at peace at that. So learn whose opinions really matter and just ignore the rest, because it really doesn't matter.
Now, what did you learn from your biggest failure?
What did I learn from my biggest failure? I think that I'm enough.
Mm-hmm. That's a very popular one.
it's it's one of these things where you get hammered by people. And there are legions of people out there that will tell you you're doing the wrong thing. You don't know what you're doing. You're a hack. You're an imposter. And if you buy into that, that can crush you. But realizing that you're enough, that can really bolster you and keep you afloat, because you're vastly outnumbered.
Fair enough.
And so just being able to rely on that is extremely helpful.
Now, what is the biggest fear you had to overcome to write your first screenplay, or just to become a screenwriter in general?
That it's not going to happen when I want and how I want it.
Yes, a great one.
You ever want to get a good chuckle? Ask some young filmmaker about their 5-year plan. You have these expectations and these ideas. By this time, I'm going to do this. By this guy, you have all these grand ideas, and it's not going to happen that way. And it's okay. You'll figure it out.
3 of your favorite films of all time.
Well, I would not be here having this conversation if it wasn't for Star Wars and Indiana Jones. It's cliche, but I am no longer too ashamed to say that those popcorn movies have had the biggest impact on me and still remain my favorites to this day. I am so much of a fan. I even like the prequels, Alex.
Stop it.
Listen, hot take. I will contend that any complaint that people have about the prequels either can be explained within the context of the films or has a precedent already set in the original trilogy. I'll go toe to toe.
That's another episode for another time, sir. Listen, man. I just watched Phantom Menace the other day with my daughter for the first time because she's a Star Wars fan, because I'm a good dad, and it was horrible. It was really, really. I mean, like, I was just looking at it and I'm like, this is. I loved it when I first came out. Like, I drank that Kool-Aid. I bought. I did all of it. The action sequences were fantastic. The pod race I loved. Yep. But Jar Jar, oh my God, it was just painful. I did enjoy Attack of the Clones better. Right. And I think Revenge of the Sith is probably the best of that trilogy.
Agreed.
Hayden's acting could have been better. Ewan was fantastic. One of the highlights of the series was without a doubt was Ewan. Natalie Portman was basically just dressing. They didn't let her do what she does. It's a painful process to go through, and I don't want to get into it, Alan, but I don't want to get into it. But I do tell people, if you are introducing your kids to Star Wars, you have to watch it in this order. You watch New Hope, Empire, then Phantom, Attack, Revenge, and then go to Revenge of the Jedi. Or excuse me, Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi. Okay,
that's the original 6. Then you continue with the new trilogy, which I love the new trilogy. I think the new trilogy is fantastic.
Yeah, they're fantastic, and
I loved Rogue One. Rogue One. I mean, so great. The greatest Darth Vader scene ever.
Oh, yeah.
And you want to hear something funny? My buddy worked on that. He worked on Rogue One, and he was telling me, he's like, dude, I would just sit there, and because they could look at any clip in the system in ILM. So he would just grab the QuickTime for that sequence, and he would just play it in the background on loop. Right. He's like, it was just the greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
So sorry everyone, we're geeking out. We will now stop.
So yeah, if you had to nail me down to one specifically, I'd probably go with Empire. I thought that was just a fantastic film, and of course Raiders is just so fundamental. And as far as a third one, the other film that was just incredibly influential for me was Braveheart.
Great film.
That one was I saw that at the time. I was working at a movie theater, and this was when I was in high school. And because I worked in a movie theater, I saw it 26 times in the theater.
Sure, yeah.
And that was the point where I think I decided, I don't know what this thing is or how it gets done, but I want to be included in something that generates this.
Yeah.
That was a childhood hero. The story of William comes from Scottish heritage, and so that was just a dream come true to see that thing on the big screen, and I wanted to be a part of that. I had no idea how or why or what. But
True.
That was a big calling card for me.
Fantastic film.
those
Fantastic
three.
film. Now, where can people find you and your work and what you're doing?
Okay. Well, I've got a website, and it's long and obnoxious, and we can just put that in the show notes. I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram. My Instagram is at AllenJ_WriteFight. That's ALLEN, the letter J_WRITEFIGHT, because I write and I fight.
Nice. Fantastic. Alan, man, I really do thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
And giving everybody a new image of what a working screenwriter is and can be. So I really do appreciate it, and I hope it does inspire and give some hope to a lot of screenwriters out there.
Well, it's not a pretty image, but it's one that works. There's a lot of mileage. What I say, it's not the years, it's the mileage, right? That's how it works out for us. But I'm absolutely tickled that I could be a part of this and try and give back to the tribe. I really admire what you're doing and how much you're giving out, and I think that it's just a wonderful thing. And the more people that do this type of stuff, that rising tide is going to raise all of our ships.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to really thank Alan for dropping those inspirational knowledge bombs on the tribe today. Thank you, Alan, so much. You are an inspiration to many screenwriters listening to this today. There is hope. You can make a living as a screenwriter, and you don't always have to go for that giant home run, the big movie studios and $200 million movies. You don't have to. That shouldn't be the only bar to a successful screenwriting career. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of other writers making a living in the screenwriting space or in the playwriting space, loving what they do and actually generating revenue every day with it. So thank you, Alan. If you want to get links to contact Alan or anything else we spoke about in this episode, please head over to the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/BPS055. And if you have that screenplay that's so amazing, but you can't get it produced for whatever reason, the things aren't lining up the way you want to, maybe you should join me at the Make Your Movie Boot Camp so I can show you how to produce that movie yourself, produce that screenplay yourself, create your own content, and take control of your own destiny and not wait for someone to give you permission to do your art and to be a screenwriter and a filmmaker. So if you want to check it out, please head over to MYM Bootcamp. That's Make Your Movie, MYMBootcamp.com. I'm hosting it on October 26th and 27th in Burbank, California. And if you haven't already, please head over to screenwritingpodcast.com, subscribe, and leave a good review for the show. It really helps us out a lot. And make sure to share this episode with at least 5 of your friends, or if not this episode, the entire podcast or website with 5 of your screenwriting friends. I want this information to get out to as many people as humanly possible. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support, guys. As always, keep on writing, no matter what. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Bulletproof Screenwriting Podcast at bulletproofscreenwriting.tv.
Let's say you just bought a house. Bad news is, you're one step closer to becoming your parents. You'll proudly mow the lawn, ask if anybody noticed you mowed the lawn, tell people to stay off the lawn, compare it to your neighbor's lawn, and complain about having to mow the lawn again. Good news is, it's easy to bundle home and auto through Progressive and save on your car insurance, which, of course, will go right into the lawn. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discount not available in all states or situations. Let's say you just bought a house. Bad news is, you're one step closer to becoming your parents. You'll proudly mow the lawn, ask if anybody noticed you mowed the lawn, tell people to stay off the lawn, compare it to your neighbor's lawn, and complain about having to mow the lawn again. Good news is, it's easy to bundle home and auto through Progressive and save on your car insurance, which, of course, will go right into the lawn. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company, affiliates, and other insurers. Discount not available in all states or situations.